Hi, everybody. This is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony podcast, where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy week 1 of stay-at-home dadding.
Woot woot.
It's been fun. And happy long weekend.
Yeah.
Not that it really changes much for you, but...
Actually adds more work.
Yeah, the kids are home on Monday.
Yep.
But I'm off, which will be great.
That's right.
Has been a good week?
It has. It's been a great week.
Cool. Both of us are a little sleepy, though, at the end of this week.
Yeah.
So we should take this opportunity to thank our amazing partners at Cafe 117. If you haven't heard us talk about Cafe 117 yet, then you haven't listened to enough Synchrony podcast episodes. Cafe 117 is an apostolic-owned coffee company. They sell premium quality blends and single origin coffees that you can buy and have shipped directly to you on subscription if you like, which is the best.
That's right.
20% of their proceeds go to support Compassion Services International and help with disaster relief efforts all around the world. We appreciate them. We're excited to partner with them, and we love their coffee. Thank you guys very much. Oh, and you can get a discount.
That's right.
If you go check the link in the bio.
Link in the description.
Yes.
Things that people on YouTube say.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to get hip with the lingo. Aging myself so badly. Okay. You and I have talked about this.
We've talked about a lot of things.
You and I have talked about the fact that before we started dating, I perceived you to be much younger than you are, and you perceived me to be much older than I was.
Yep. Ancient.
Why did you perceive me to be ancient? Old and stricken in years.
Like, so much older is relative, because when
You were like 19.
Yeah, when you're 19, someone who's 5 years older than you is much older than you.
Sure.
And so I thought you were older than me, mainly because the people you hung around were somewhere between 4 and 8 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just assumed you're an old fart.
Yeah. And I mean, you're not wrong. I tell people that I'm secretly like living my best old woman life, like inside a 30-something-year-old body. Like, because if I could spend my days sitting and doing puzzles and crocheting and reading by a window, I would do that.
Yep.
It'd be great. Not that that's what people of a certain age do. They're mostly very busy. It's the ones I talk to. But if I were of a certain age and I had the choice, that's what I would be doing with my time. Just saying. Wow, that was a good one.
I need coffee.
Yeah. So we're talking about age. And I think that when I started the project and started gathering data, for whatever reason, I did not expect age to be as big of a deal as it has been.
Why is that?
I think I was really thinking more that things were going to come down to like compatibility, right? Like when I was matching people, I'd be spending more time thinking about their emotional needs, their spiritual goals. And that's where I would have to focus a lot of my effort.
Yeah.
And we do talk about those things, and those are very important. But I also spend a lot of time just thinking about age and how people feel about age. It comes up a lot. Like it's a significant portion of the questions that I ask and the conversation I have with people.
When we first started this, I totally knew that age was going to be not an issue, but a factor.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the guys that I know that are single and that are older still prefer women who are younger than them. Mm-hmm. And depending on how old they are, they might have lost perspective of how young they would prefer and how weird that might be.
Sometimes I think we've met a couple of people where we really had to kind of dig down to the root of like, okay, where is this preference coming from? And let me preface this all by saying we're going to be talking about age preferences in terms of preferred age of potential partners. It is fine to like what you like. Like, let's just put that out there.
Yeah.
Right? Human attraction is as varied and complex as humans. We'll say that over and over again. People like different things. Nobody is here to yuck anyone's yum. Yeah. Right?
Let me caveat by saying weird. I mean, it's more of how much they were narrowing their pool of finding someone.
Yeah. People can
And
place restrictions on themselves.
I consider that to be weird because I'm like, there's so many people that are closer to your age range that are more than willing and capable and more mature. And so I guess it's just preferences at that point. But
yeah.
So
we're going to dig into it a little bit because it's something that we talk about a lot. And because I think that it's something that people encounter as a challenge in the dating space, right? So in the Synchrony process, if you haven't been through it, we gather data about people's age preferences a couple different ways.
Yep.
So one, I have a question in the survey that they take right before they meet with me that asks if they prefer to date people who are older than they are, people who are younger, people who are their same age, or people of any age.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have to select one of those options to indicate their preference. I also have a question during the consultation portion in which I ask, what would an appropriate age gap be for you, both older and younger?
Yeah.
Right. So we dig into it a little bit more in the consultation if we meet with them. So I've now been gathering data about all the people that we've surveyed over the last, year plus.
Okay.
And I sat down with it and I did some number crunching because I wanted to see if there were any patterns and trends in people's preferences and how those mapped to just broader experiences, right? When I say that I spend a lot of time dealing with age, I think that's honestly the key factor. It's become one of the key factors that I use for matching.
That's a little bit of a curveball compared to what you were expecting.
Yeah, like people, when I find someone who is, like I meet a new person and they're ready to go into the pipeline, when I start looking for potential partners for them, the first thing I'm doing is starting with age.
Okay.
Right? What age do they feel is appropriate for them, and who do I have within that window that they would feel is a good fit? Right? And those aren't hard barriers. I look for on either side of their preferences a little bit just to see if there's someone slightly outside of the scope of what they would think is their preference.
Yeah.
But I'm generally using age as my first sort of way to narrow the pool down to who's the right type of person.
Okay.
Guess how many people we have surveyed so far?
Ooh, this I actually don't know. Not sure. How many?
We have surveyed 379 in total.
Sweet.
Yep. And that's not everyone who's actively being matched right now. This is anyone who's ever taken a survey with us during the beta testing portion of the project. Also the folks who have been surveyed more recently.
Yep.
So not all of those people moved on to have a consultation with us. Not all of them entered the matching pipeline. Some of them entered the pipeline and then left the pipeline because they found someone or for other reasons.
Yep.
So that's not representative of the entire community of people that we have right now. But it is a pretty good amount of survey data.
Yeah. In terms of data, that's a substantial sample size.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I went and looked at preferences for the age of partners.
Ooh.
And it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to grab the laptop really quick and I'll show you something? I will find a way to make these graphs available to people somehow in the show notes by the time we get ready to put this up.
Okay.
But basically what I did was I looked at, so I separated the data by gender. So I looked at data from all the women and all the men, right? And I looked at what percentage of each group preferred each of those age breakdowns that I mentioned before. So how many women preferred to date younger people? How many women preferred to date people the same age, people slightly older, or people of any age, right?
Okay.
And I did the same for men. Just take a look at these graphs really quickly. So these are the women's graphs broken down by the women's age groups, right?
Okay.
And these are the men's graphs broken down by the same age groups. And I'll find a way to show this to you guys as well. What do you notice about, so the colors here, I have 4 colors that represent this. The blue on all of these represents people who said that they would date any age. The red represents people who would date people that are older. The yellow represents people who would date the same age group. And green represents people that would date younger people.
Okay. So there is actually a decent portion of people that will date any age.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's the biggest proportion of how people respond in their survey, which is good.
That's cool.
But what do you notice about the difference between the women's row versus the men's row?
Well, the women's row, there's a substantial amount of people who prefer older.
Mm-hmm.
And for the male, there's a substantial amount of them that prefer younger.
Yeah. So what we found is that if we look at totals just across the board, all age groups,
Yeah.
right? For women, we surveyed 300 women. So we have a larger female level, number of respondents than we do male. 301, actually. 52% of women across all age groups prefer to date someone of any age. They're open, right? So over half are open to any potential dating partner.
Yeah.
Okay. 18% or 19% prefer to date people who are older than they are.
Okay.
27% prefer to date people around their same age. And only 2.3% prefer to date men who are younger than they are.
Okay.
Okay. So women, the highest number prefer to date, are open to any age group, right? But then in terms of specific age preferences, women prefer people who are their same age, then people who are older than they are, and then people who are younger as a low priority.
Yeah.
Right. With men, it is distinctly different.
Yeah.
So about 40% of men are open to dating someone of any age, according to the survey. Okay. 42% of men prefer to date a younger woman. 42%, in contrast to 2.3% of women.
Yeah.
Crazy. 17% of men prefer to date people who are around their same age, in contrast to 27% of women. And only 1.3% of men prefer to date a woman who is older than they are. That is one respondent in our survey.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
They almost mirror each other.
Like, opposites?
Yeah, opposite. Sorry, yeah. I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
Only because the data says what it says.
Right. And this is a relatively small sample size on both sides. So this is not representative of how women across the board feel or how men feel.
But it kind of fits to what I assume, though.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of studies, and I'll link an article that I think gives a pretty good summary of the research on this. There's been a decent amount of studies in psychology and anthropology that look at partner age preference across different age groups. And what they find often is that men statistically prefer to date younger women, right? And are more likely to prefer women of the same lower age group for longer. So older men are more likely to continue to date women in their 20s or to seek out partners in their 20s, even as they age past that.
Okay. So like the Leonardo DiCaprio's.
Yeah, that's just Leo gets a lot of flack for that. That's a stereotype, I think, of like.
I don't know if it's a stereotype.
Yeah, I guess it's a trend. Anyway, so
sorry, Leo.
Yeah, if you're watching, hi.
Yeah.
And women in these studies statistically tend to prefer men who are older.
Okay.
Right.
But the thing is like, I find it makes sense to me for them to want someone of the same age, right? Or
Sure.
close to the same age within a couple of years. But if you look at it from like a third person point of view, men probably, especially if they're older and never been married, are probably looking for someone who, I hate to bring fertility into this, but like it is more about like security of bloodline, right? That's about like finding someone who is willing to have children. It gives them a longer amount of time. Women probably want security, maturity, someone that is more, hopefully, emotionally well-rounded.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense in terms of like skipping to the good part, Well,
I think so. What you're speaking to is like what a lot of anthropologists and sociologists point to as factors that would influence these preferences. Helen Fisher talks a lot about this in her research, right?
Okay.
And she's a biological anthropologist, and so she points to Basically humans' mammalian tendencies, right? What do we as animals do in our mate selection?
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree that humans are more complex than your average mammal, right? But she's basically saying what biological factors influence our choices. And her theory matches what the research says about this, which is that men do prioritize partnering with women who are more likely to be fertile,
Yeah.
right? For women, that peak fertility period usually happens in their mid-20s, right? And like you said, women tend to seek out security. The biological argument for this is that they're looking for someone who will be a great father,
Okay.
and afford the security of being able to provide that nurturing environment. That for humans comes with a need for resources,
Okay.
finances, right? Like you said, emotional stability. Women are attracted to men who have their act together in whatever society defines that to mean.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And the perception is that tends to come with age. So people make biological arguments about this. I want to suggest that it's also very cultural,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I think that our society has told us for a very long time that men who are more wealthy, more powerful, are attractive. That tends to come with age and a more developed career.
Yeah.
Society has also told us that women who are youthful, slender, dewy-eyed, and wrinkle-free skin are beautiful,
Yeah.
which tends to correlate to women who are biologically younger.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of factors at play here, right? We've got maybe this biological influence of what our bodies seek out in partners that tells us, our human mammal side of what's going to make us a great partner. I think we have society that tells us what to expect from our partners of a certain age, right? And then I think you do have individual preferences that
Sure.
come into play. I will say, so we talked about how a lot of the survey data, people would say that they were open to matches of any age. When I meet with people in consultations and I ask that directly, very few people say, oh, anything's fine.
Sure.
Like when push comes to shove and I say, what's an appropriate age gap? I'd have to go back and look through all of my interviews to confirm this, but based on just like a gut sense of what I hear most often, most women are open to dating a guy 5, maybe even 10 years older than they are, no less than 5 years younger. And that's usually pushing it a little bit.
Okay.
Men, depending on their age, are willing to date someone 10 years younger or more.
Okay.
Right? Not if they're in their 20s, right? Usually
Sure.
if they're in their 20s, they're like, 2 or 3 years younger is fine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But if they're in their 40s, sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm okay with dating a 21-year-old, right?
No offense to 21-year-olds,
Right.
but like, I imagine myself now, and God forbid if you were to die,
Right.
like, I could not imagine a world in which I would want to date someone that young.
What do you think?
It's about maturity for me. It's about life experience. It's about understanding how the world spins. Like it's
Sure.
To me, when I was 21, even when you were 21, we were just starting to date.
You would not have wanted to date me when I was 21. We weren't
No,
dating then.
Yeah, we got married when we were 23, babe.
Oh, wow. I think of myself as a 21-year-old and I'm 21-year-old and I'm like, I had no idea what was going on.
I know, and neither did I. And it's
Yeah.
one of those things, it's like the people we were at 21 are drastically different than we are now.
Sure.
So for me, I'm 30. No.
You're 31.
Oh, gosh. And going to be 32 in a couple
It's
months.
happening, guys.
Yeah. Like marrying someone 10 years younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
the appeal of youthfulness does not, like,
yeah,
for me personally.
Well, and you have been married and you have children.
That's true.
So I think it's different for someone who's never had that experience.
That's fair.
But
what percentage originally of our people were single parents?
Not a huge percentage. So 40% of the people that we work with have been married before. Not all of them were parents, though.
Okay. But still married before, though. You've
Sure, have experienced
been
it
around
before.
the block.
Right. And so all this to say that, like, I think that if I were to go and verbally ask each person that we surveyed what their preferences were, it might be a little more rigid even than what the survey data shows, right? But the takeaway from the data is that within our community that we've gotten some exposure to, these preferences persist of men preferring women who are younger, women generally preferring men who are older. There are outliers in both directions, right? But that tends to be the trend. So I think that there are a few important things to consider here, right? First, I want to take a moment to go back to fertility, which you brought up really briefly. And I first want to say to anyone who is listening, particularly if you were a woman in your late 30s, early 40s, late 40s, who has not had the opportunity to have biological children, I want to recognize that that can be a source of grief that very few people in church will recognize.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean the door is closed entirely, right? Both of us have, my brother was born when my mother was 41. You were born when your mom was how old?
38.
38? Okay. So, we've known people who have had what the medical community might call more advanced pregnancies, right? But we recognize that it becomes much more challenging as you age as a woman to hang on to that desire to have your own biological children. And there is a grief that can come with that, a mourning for that type of life that you always envisioned yourself having.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that those people can't be parents. It doesn't mean that they can't be mothers, right? And really become that person for someone. But if you are a woman who grew up hoping to conceive a child, carry that child, birth your child, and watch that child grow from infancy, and you feel that that has been taken from you, we're really sorry.
Yeah.
And that's something that I wish more people would acknowledge. That is a hard path to walk. And it's okay to be frustrated about that. It's okay to feel angry about that, I think. And it's not something broken about you that's preventing that. Not every woman experiences that, right? There are women who are in their 30s and 40s and haven't had children and are okay with it, right?
Yeah.
But I have spoken to women who have really struggled with that. And I just want to acknowledge that that's an area of grief. If anything about this episode is going to make that really hard, stop here. We're talking about age and fertility, and I recognize that it's just painful for some people.
And I want to, again, mention we are not counselors. We are not therapists. We are just two married adults that are recognizing that there's this pain that is out there. Mm-hmm. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. And, we encourage you to find someone who is qualified to help unpack that grief if you need to.
Yeah.
You'll benefit from that. Your future marriage will benefit from that. So thinking about that, I think when I talk to men who are in their late 30s and early 40s, right, who are hesitant to date women of their same age or older, a lot of the times it comes back to that desire that they want to have a family, right? They want to have children. They're excited about being a father. They also don't want to have children 9 months to the day right after they get married.
Yeah, that's the issue too.
Yeah.
And the hard thing is I can see the issue that arises when you're getting in your late 30s, early 40s as a man that wants to get married to someone, mm-hmm. also wants to have kids, and men generally don't have the issue of the biological time clock, right? Of having to wait to have children. But at the same time, they want to get to know their wife first.
Right. I think, there is a challenge that comes with immediately having a family after getting married.
Yeah. And even as a couple who had kids
2 years.
No, we were 23, got married 27 when we had our first kid. So 4 years after we were married, we had our first kid. We had that time to get to know each other, and I extremely value that time. So I understand, and not everyone waits that long, and that's okay too. It's just one of those things. It's easier for a guy to go, okay, well, I'm just going to look for someone younger, so that way we have that time to get to know them
Right.
and then we can have kids. So like I see the perks of why that is an option, or why that is usually a choice.
Right. The challenge of that is then, if you have women who are in that like mid 30s to early 40s range who want to date someone their same age. They don't want to date someone much older. Those men might be more interested in women who are younger. And it's not across the board.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a blanket statement.
Right. So all of that to say is that this introduces some challenges into the arena when we talk about who is compatible with someone.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time talking to people about their parenting goals and the timeline in which they want to have kids, especially if they're in that critical window of fertility, right?
Yeah, y'all. We talk about everything in these consultations.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a surface level consultation going, so what's your Enneagram?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, this is the important stuff, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
people's marriages are made and broken over things like this.
Yeah.
So we need to be really intentional about it. And so, yeah, we talk about like, hey, do you want to have kids? Are you open to different forms of parenting? And I think that it adds this very intense pressure for people in between, I would say, the ages of 28 and 40, right? In particular, when they're thinking about starting a family.
Yeah.
It just adds this layer of intensity to who is a good fit for them and who they could be matched with, especially if they've never been married before and haven't had children.
Yeah.
So none of those things are wrong.
No.
Right? It's certainly not wrong to want a family. It's not wrong to be a man who wants to have children and doesn't want to have them right after he gets married. It's not wrong to be a woman in your early 40s and really want to have had biological children and still be interested in trying, because there are women who are biologically capable of having children at that period, right?
Yeah.
Spoiler, there are also women in their 20s who can't.
Yeah.
So fertility is so complicated and nuanced. I also want to put out that marrying a younger woman doesn't guarantee fertility. And that's its own challenge.
Should we talk about the complexities of marrying someone so much younger than you? And from the not marrying, looking for and dating someone so much younger than you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, from the perspective of the younger person that's being pursued?
Yeah. Are you thinking particularly about an older man and a younger woman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about it. What are your thoughts?
Well, no, I'm asking like what is, from a woman's perspective, if you were 21 years old and you were being pursued by a 37, 38-year-old.
Yeah.
Not saying that man has anything wrong with him or if he's a creep or anything. I'm not saying that. Like, he could be a God-fearing, amazing person.
Yeah. What's
going through your mind as a 21-year-old?
I mean, I think you have questions, right? If someone is actively seeking someone in what we would maybe perceive to be a different stage of life, it does bring up questions about like, well, what are your motivations, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't you with someone who's your own age? I think there's also sometimes a power dynamic that you have to be really conscious of, right?
Yeah.
If you are a young woman at the outset of your career, or maybe you're still in school and you're being pursued by a much older man with a very established career, established finances, a very clear picture of how he wants his life and family to look, there's a dynamic of influence there that I think is important to consider, not for every couple, but he is by many metrics more powerful than the young woman in that scenario,
sure.
Right? In terms of how society perceives power and in how we measure things like success. So it would certainly make me cautious if our daughter grew up and did
that's
that.
what I'm thinking about that now. Like,
right.
And the thing is like, you always hear the age gap question. The younger you are and the bigger the age gap, the weirder it is. But when you get in your 50s, seeing a 51-year-old marrying a 70-year-old, we're like, oh yeah, whatever, good for them.
Right.
Right. But, in terms of like, a 20-year-old, 21, 22-year-old, I hate getting into this, but like their brain's not fully developed yet.
Well, and women, this is actually, there's a biological basis that women are maturing more quickly than men in some of these critical areas. Like there's studies, it's not
I
just a
know.
stereotype. But no, I agree with you. Like I think there's that.
Not just developmentally, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about in life experience too.
So that's the thing that I think we're getting to, which is that it's less maybe about numerical age and more about stage of life.
Yeah.
Right. The reason why we feel less uncomfortable maybe about people marrying between the ages of, 55 and 70 is because even if they are at either end of that age range, they're probably in the same phase in the sense that they're not raising children anymore, most
Yeah.
likely. They're probably looking into the end of their career, retirement soon, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
They might have kids and grandkids at that point, depending on how their families are structured. It's a very different phase than to have someone who is 40 with children that are potentially already preteens, right? Who's established in her career, talking to a 21-year-old who is just at the beginning of that kind of life building,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's an important thing to consider. How far apart are these two people in terms of the stage of life that they're in?
Yeah.
Right.
If we have someone that, a guy or a girl, that says, I prefer someone 10, 15 years older than me,
I'll seek that
that's
out.
less alarming to me for some reason than someone who is 40 saying, I prefer a 20-year-old, 21-year-old.
Right.
And I, again, maybe alarming is not the right word. Again, there's more questions.
So I'm just going to point to the elephant in the room. It feels predatory.
It does.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
right? Preferences are preferences. For better or for worse, much older men have been marrying much younger women for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right. Ruth and Boaz, story in the Bible. We don't know exactly what their ages were, right? But
Yeah.
she was a young widow who'd barely been married to her first husband for much time. So we can imagine that she might have been under 20.
Yeah, sure.
And Boaz was an older man. And he even says when she seeks him out, I'm so impressed that you sought me out instead of a younger man, right? Age gap is not something that's new.
Yeah.
And age gap relationships can be successful. But there are just concerning trends that we want to think about, that we've seen throughout history of people who victimize people that are much younger and more inexperienced because they wield a dynamic of power with their life experience and with their, ability to be persuasive. That's what I think makes us nervous.
Yeah.
So getting out of the weeds here before we get ourselves in trouble.
If we already haven't.
Yeah. Preferences are preferences.
Yeah.
And yours are okay, right? It is okay to want what you want and to be attracted to who you are attracted to. I think the message that I want our folks to take away from this is that age is less important to fixate on than alignment in terms of your goals,
Yep.
right? Your priorities and values. If parenting is a value to you, if specifically biological parenting is a value to you, that's certainly going to drive who you select as a potential partner,
Yeah.
right? If having someone who's in the same stage of life that you're in is a value to you because you want to be able to share the same experiences and the same activities and investment in different things, that's something to consider as well. So I would say we want to really encourage people to think about age as less of a predictor of someone's alignment.
Yeah.
And really think harder about what the other person's goals are and what their own plans are for their life.
Yep.
And ultimately, generally speaking, I think we've seen couples with age gaps a few years in one way or a few years in another who can be equally successful.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We also touched on this a little bit, but there are stereotypes associated with people of certain ages that perpetuate some of these preferences.
Okay.
So, based on like American society, right? What do you expect a man in his 40s to do or have already in his life?
Theoretically, a career, degree, aging parents.
Sure.
Probably a house, probably a car financing or paid off, stuff like that, like already developed in life.
Very well established.
Yeah.
And the reality is that economically that isn't true for everyone
Yeah,
in
it's
their
true.
40s, right? I think that that process is being delayed significantly for people because of the economy and the job market and everything else. Um, Alternately, what do you expect a woman in her early 20s to be like based on just like American stereotypes?
Someone in their young 20s, a woman in their young 20s is probably thinking about college, trying to decide what kind of career they're going for. Um,
Fun,
yeah,
open to new
wanting to travel.
experiences, right?
And these are
Adventurous.
stereotypes, but like wanting to travel, wanting
Sure.
to see the world. If they haven't left their hometown ever and they're going to a college away, they're probably like wanting to visit. And there's a lot of like young American, fresh college stereotypes that are
Right.
probably there.
Wide-eyed, full of wonder, open to lots
Yeah.
of new things. Um,
Going to the mission field, finding a husband at Bible college.
sure. Um, yeah, I mean, technically at 21, she's close to graduating, but anyway, like,
That's fair.
I think the point is that we perceive women in their early 20s to be very adventurous and fun as a stereotype in American culture. We perceive men in their 40s to be very established. Um, I know people in both of those age
Yeah.
categories who buck those trends.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
There's always going to be people bucking the trend.
Yeah, and maybe it's the majority, right? Most of the 21-year-old women I talk to are focused on building their careers, and yes, they're excited and adventurous and fun people, but they're not flighty and naive and innocent in the way that we infantilize 21-year-olds in like our American mythology,
Oh,
right?
sure.
And there are 40-year-old men who are just figuring themselves out because that's not to dampen their maturity either, but they've tried a career, it didn't work, they're trying something else. They've maybe gone through a marriage and it didn't work and they're having to redefine themselves,
Maybe
right?
have a kid.
Yeah, and the landscape might be totally unexpected and totally
Yep.
not what they envisioned having at that age. So
And we're not even really bringing like we're not even talking about our beliefs at this point either. We're talking
no,
about just general people.
right.
Then talking about depending on when they got into church, when they started serving the Lord, when they got the Holy Ghost, when they really started dedicating themselves. So that really alters the course of your timeline.
Yeah.
Of what you're doing with your life and where you're staying, where you're going, who and where you're investing in. So it's like there's so many facets to it.
Right. I think that there's also a stereotype about attractiveness at different stages of life.
Okay.
So I think, and this is again an American cultural thing, I don't think this is just a church thing. I think that we perceive younger women to be more attractive as a whole, right? So all the country songs are about women who are 18 apparently, which is weird. I think that women are often attracted to a more established, mature man, right? Someone in his 30s is perceived as really attractive. And I think people sort of hit their apex of conventional attractiveness at widely different points in their lives, right? We've all known people who in their 50s we consider to be very, very attractive people who we see a picture of them when they were in their 20s and they were like, wow, that was not what I expected,
Yeah.
right? And the opposite. People go through different phases at different times. Our bodies change so rapidly. It's not linear, right?
Yeah.
So you're not losing out on the opportunity for someone to be beautiful and fun if you choose to date someone who's not in their 20s, and you're not losing out on the opportunity to find someone mature and settled if you're choosing to date someone younger. I met a young man in his 20s this week who right out of graduate school found a great career path, settled into it, is very established in his career, is, working toward owning his own home, incredibly mature. And I don't think that he's entirely the exception to the norm. I think millennial men in particular felt a lot of pressure, and I guess like old Gen Zers felt a lot of pressure to quickly develop their career because of the economic pressures that were present, when we were growing up. And he just had his head screwed on so straight. but I know that women in their early 30s would be hesitant to date him.
Yeah, because like, oh, he's probably immature.
Right, exactly. And he
Yeah.
was so focused on the right things.
That's actually what I'm trying to get this point to is what should our listeners who are single and looking consider as a result of this data?
Consider opening yourself to an age group that you wouldn't have said you preferred before.
Yeah, we're not
Right.
saying change your preferences completely.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying just be open to the idea that there might be people who buck the trend.
Yeah, and don't put such hard boundaries around what age means for someone's readiness for you, right? Ultimately, it's really more about stage of life and what their goals and priorities are.
I think goals and priorities this is our preference. Goals and priorities should trump age preference unless there is strictly a fertility conversation.
Right. Yeah, I think fertility is an area where, because having biological children can be a part of someone's value system.
Yeah.
In those areas where there's a challenge to that because of just timeline, we have to be cognizant of people's age preferences.
Yeah.
That's really the only place, though. I think that's why this is such I think that's why I have so much joy matching people who are like over the age of 50.
Yeah.
Because they're really open to anything at that point. Because they don't have to worry generally about that fertility question.
Yeah.
And
there's a different weight that's taken off of them.
Yeah. And they can just go into an environment and be like, well, let's just see, or, in general, I think people who have moved beyond their childbearing season, and they might have done that at the age of 25, right? But like, if they decided that they don't want to have any more children, it does take off a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So this is not me trying to convince anyone to change their family plan, right?
Yeah.
That's just an area where I think we experience a lot of pressure. And so people who are on either side of that pressure point, where they're young enough that they have a lot of time to think about family planning, or they're old enough that they've kind of moved beyond that stage, are in a state of freedom when it comes to who they want to choose. And that's really exciting to get to see them kind of explore.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the takeaways are: keep your opportunities as open as you feel that you can.
Yeah.
We will follow the preferences that you give us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
But again, and we've said this a lot the last couple podcasts, but like challenge your preferences. And we're not saying compromise, we're not saying anything like that. What we are saying is there might be someone amazing that you normally would not have considered because of their age, and they might be right around your age. They might be slightly older than you were expecting them to be, but if they fit your values, you're going to have a wonderful marriage with this person, and you might have passed up that opportunity otherwise.
Yeah. Keep your options open.
Yep.
I tell people all the time in consultations, if I find someone who I think is a fantastic fit for them based on their values and priorities, who is slightly outside of their age preference, I'm going to bring it up to them anyway.
Oh, sure.
And I do that all the time.
Yeah. And that's something too. If you're considering using our services and think we're going to try our best to stick as close to your preferences as possible. But like Megan says, like if there's someone that's amazing that is like right up your alley, but they're slightly outside the preference zone, we'll present that person to you and you can choose to say yes or no.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. It was interesting to go back through and look at the data and just see. I do think that there's, stronger preferences for women when they are younger, for older men, stronger preferences for men when they get older, for younger women.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt. There's lots of variability out there, but I think it's just one more way that we can sort of critically evaluate what we're looking for and ask where those desires come from. It's okay to have them.
Yep.
But we need to know where they come from, what their origin is, and make sure that it's really speaking to your values and not just a preference that's been sort of placed in your mind over time.
Yep.
Anything else we got going on right now, babe?
Well, we might have a surprise coming in the next few weeks.
Oh, yeah, we did. We ordered something.
Yep.
For our community and folks who
Yeah.
are not already part of the Synchrony community.
Community is going to get it for free.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I don't know how much to tease it, but I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will be ready and available before UPCI General Conference, which would be nice in case there will be people there before all of the holiday events kick in.
Yeah. The HYCs.
Yeah, all those end of year meetup opportunities. So
yeah,
we'll have more to come about that soon, probably in a few weeks. But yeah,
as long as they come in and not misordered or something.
Yeah, fingers crossed. They're coming from a long way away. So we're just going to leave that little teaser right there.
Plant that seed.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Hey, babe.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me be a stay-at-home dad.
You're very welcome. It's really a joy. My house is cleaner than it's been in a very long time.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having fun.
Good. I'm glad. I am too.
I have less time than I expected to have.
Yep.
Just like we planned out like the day structure. I was like, I'm going to get so much done. And I'm like,
you're like a part-time Uber driver, but for people that never tip.
2 hours of my day is commuting between picking kids up and dropping them off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
So, anyways.
It's good times.
Yep.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
See you later.
Bye.